Now, don't get me wrong, I am vehemently opposed to U.S. involvement in Ukraine. I don't think we should be there at all. That is not our fight. That is not part of the U.S. Ukraine is not part of the U.S. United States of America. We don't have any business being there, and I think it's very reckless and dangerous for us to get involved there in potentially aggravating the Russian bear with nuclear weapons. I even said as much when I wrote to my congressional representative in my district, Angie Craig, and she just wrote back, even though I expressed my concerns about potentially nuclear war and mutually assured destruction, and how this in being involved with this proxy war against Russia raises the risk of catastrophic nuclear war and all its horrors. But when she wrote me back, she didn't even address the issue of the dangers of nuclear war at all. She just sent back a letter with basically a Goebbels war propaganda talking points that has been put out by the mainstream media in the deep state, saying, Putin bad. Basically, that's all it was. Putin bad. Gotta stop Putin. Was basically the extent of the letter. And so the point, the thing with that kind of rhetoric is that it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because even if you take as a given Putin bad, that you still want to negotiate in good faith negotiations in such circumstances if you're facing the bad guy in a situation where everybody is in danger. If the bad guy acts in a way that that could harm everybody, for instance, I can take an analogy of, say, people that are being held hostage somewhere, say in a bank or whatever. There's hostages, and then the hostage taker. Well, what do you do then? Do you negotiate with the hostage heavily armed hostage taker, or do you insult him and just do everything to aggravate and instigate the hostage taker? I think most people would say, let's negotiate. We want to live. The hostages want to live, and so yes, it's bad that anybody is taking them hostage, but that's a given. So now that that's a given, let's negotiate in good faith, not insult and not aggravate and not push this hostage taker to the edge of doing something rash that could put the lives of the hostages in jeopardy. Another example might be, say you're out driving around on the country road, and suddenly in the rearview mirror you see some redneck in a 4x4 pickup starts tailgating you, and he's got a big full gun rack in the back of his pickup there, you can see. And so what do? Do you get in road rage and start tapping on your brakes? Yeah, take that, redneck. I'm gonna flip you the bird. Up yours, man. Yeah, take that. You gonna do that? No, I don't think so. Because you want to survive. You want to live. So you're gonna just go do away with any road rage there. You're not gonna get aggravated. You're just gonna do whatever you can to survive. You're gonna pull over to the side of the road. Hopefully the redneck zooms past you, and then you kind of like, I don't want to aggravate him anymore. So this hothead redneck, I just want to live through this, that's all. So yeah, of course the redneck should not have been tailgating you in the first place. That was wrong. That's a given. But what's the goal here? I think it's survival. I think that's most people in the U.S. when it comes right down to it. Yeah, given all the horrors of a potential nuclear war, we're like, hey, whoa. If they just kind of thought through this, like, wait, maybe we shouldn't be aggravating be involved so much, and start potentially aggravating the Russians and Putin. Let's just calm down here and let's try to get peaceful resolution of this. Let's reach detente. I think that's what most people would do if they just thought through this. But let's listen to the talking heads on the mainstream media pushing their Goebbels media talking points that doesn't even think it doesn't go along that line of thought of what the potential dangers are that we're reaching here in Ukraine, and so people just don't think things through like they should. But that's a given. That yes, we should not be in there. We should be trying to getting a peaceful resolution in Ukraine. We should try to reach detente with Russia. But if it's a given let's just say maybe us those of us are trying to achieve peace. Maybe let's just take as a given that we're tilting at windmills, and there's so many forces that are pushing for more war. So now, what should be our mindset now? And my thinking is that, well, that's why I'm making this video is more so to calm the people that are maybe worried that there's a real significant high danger of something like World War III and nuclear war potentially even. I'm hoping that I've thought through this, and I think, well, maybe that's not too likely. I think there's that maybe. That's what the points I've written down here that I wanted to explore for why I think that most likely this will play out to the point where it'll reach a resolution that does not escalate to World War III, and I think that's most likely that this will stay mostly within Ukraine. And I think what we're looking at here, it's still a proxy war. Despite this, there's lots of rhetoric. I mean, there's increased armaments are getting sent to Ukraine, and there was a statement by the German foreign minister that some have called a declaration of war by Germany against Russia, and that I do not believe is the case. This I don't think this German foreign minister has the authority to declare war. That's a declaration of war is a official statement made by somebody who has the official authority to make such a statement. And not only I don't think the German foreign minister has that authority, she did not actually say they've declared war with Germany. She just said there something along the lines where she said she just said use like the words we are war with Russia, I think something like that, but it's not the same as saying we've declared war with Russia. So I think just saying it, but a lot of YouTubers with gazillions of subscribers have made that their headline. And I'll see on Twitter as well, people say, oh, Germany declared war on Russia. No, that has not happened. No need to raise the alarm level. It's going to cause angst with a lot of people that when you say things like that, people are they're worried enough. No need to make them any more nervous than they already are. So that's why I'm hoping I can calm things down a little bit. It provides some words of reassurance that why I think that a escalation into World War III is not likely. And these are my points. This is a continuation. What we're seeing in Ukraine now is, I believe, is a continuation of the. It's sort of like a war mode. A mode of action. Par for the course of what's happened since when nuclear powers are at odds in a war situation post World War II. We've seen this before, where two nuclear powers are at odds in a proxy war situation. This has happened before since World War II, but this is just the first time it's happened within Europe. It's happened at least on two occasions in Asia, though. First with the Korean War, and then with the Vietnam War. And so, like, in both cases, with Korea and Vietnam, like, the Soviet Union sent a great deal of armaments to both countries. In both situations, Korea and Vietnam were the proxy for the Soviet Union. But here, with Ukraine, the roles have been reversed effectively. Whereas with Korea and Vietnam wars, the Soviet Union did not send any overt, at least not on a large scale, they did not send any large scale of overtly sent troops to Korea or Vietnam, but instead the West did, U.S. Mainly the U.S., but also, at least in Vietnam, France sent, I believe, a number of troops there. They've historically had a strong presence in Vietnam. But here in Ukraine, the roles have been reversed, where it's the U.S. that's the one that's sending in the West, or NATO, the other NATO countries, that are sending the armaments and covertly sending advisors to Ukraine. So they're overtly sending armaments, covertly sending advisors, but not overtly sending any troops. Whereas Russia, they're the ones that's sending both the troops and the armaments to Ukraine. So it's a reversal of the roles from Korea and Vietnam wars. But yeah, so however, so we look at those situations with Korea and Vietnam. Notice that it did not escalate outside of them, for the most part, with the possible exception of with Laos. In the Vietnam War, there was some action there. It was covert, but also Laos was not a nuclear power. But otherwise, it largely remained restricted to the countries of the proxy countries, the Vietnam and Korea. So I think my prediction would be this will resolve to something most similar to Korea, where Korea was separated, still is, in North Korea and South Korea, but here in this case it would be the eastern Ukraine would be separated from western Ukraine. And I think that's how it's going to, I predict that's how it's going to work out. Of course, I don't know for sure, but that's my prediction. And that's, I believe, is how it's going to play out. And no World War III, just as no World War III came about in Korea and Vietnam. And it did not happen because I believe there are governors in place. Now, I'm not talking about, people, the heads of U.S. states, governors of states. I'm talking about measures, as in similar to, say, a car, internal combustion engine car might have a governor in it to limit the amount of power it's put in. I remember back in high school, I was in a car riding with a teammate to a cross-country ski practice. He had a 68 Camaro, 4 on the floor, 350. I think it had a 4-barrel carburetor, but didn't have that much pickup, not that much acceleration. I thought, well, I bet his dad put a governor in place to limit the power of the car for the safety of his son, and that's why governors are in place in such situations for safety reasons. And I think there's some governors in place since World War II, put in place either in writing, or in agreement in writing or verbally, or just an understanding, in order to prevent a World War III type of scenario, because it's so catastrophic, mutually assured destruction in terms of nuclear weapons, at least, is something that would be very bad for business. Now, look at it from the perspective of these corporate defense contractors. Look how disastrous that would not be good for business. If we get into a Mad Max scenario of post-apocalyptic nuclear war situation, who's going to be buying their weapons? There's not going to be much of any civilization left to pay for those weapons. But right now, the current situation where things are get drawn out in Ukraine, that's a gravy train. Ukraine's a gravy train for these defense contractors. The way things are, they're doing great. They're going gangbusters on the stock market. Their stock is rising. They're raking in profits. Just the way things are now. They don't want to change anything. They do not want nuclear war either. They do not want World War III because they know that could very well lead to nuclear war, and that would be very bad for business. Nuclear war is very bad for business for the defense contractors and everybody else too. So I think there are governors in place. There was understanding that that this has to be limited to the proxy country, the main proxy country involved, which is Ukraine, just as in the Korea and Vietnam wars, those namesake wars. That's where the war was largely limited to. Now, as long as there's there's like two things need to not happen. Now, if there's two things, either one starts happening, then that's when you start to be, that'll be a categorical quantum leap of escalation. So either if there's large scale, overt sending of troops by the West into Ukraine, or there's strikes happening that's not accidental, that outside, like bombings or missile strikes that are not accidental, happening outside of Ukraine, say either in Russia or in NATO countries. If those two start happening, I know there was the thing in the Crimean Bridge, that was pretty like small scale, and also it's I think there's still some dispute about whether Crimea is still part of Ukraine or not. So far we could let that. It was a limit. That was very limited, fortunately. But if it starts going outside and you start seeing deliberate bombings, missile strikes or bombing strikes in Russia or by the NATO or vice versa, you start seeing strikes by Russia into NATO countries. If any of those situations start happening, then that's time then I'll be very concerned. There's a lot of rhetoric going on, but that's going to happen inevitably. But what I'm worried about is if that starts happening in a material stance, it actually physically starts happening. Either troops are overtly sent to Ukraine. I know they're covertly there's already troops over there in Ukraine, sent by NATO, at least like advisors. But they're still a covert scale. So just as I'm sure there were covert troops or advisors sent by Soviet Union to Korea and Vietnam, but they still remain contained though. So as long as the sort of situation that we saw in Korea and Vietnam, I don't see any reason why not to think that the same thing is going to happen in Ukraine, where things will remain contained within that country, and hopefully we will not see a escalation into a World War III and a potential nuclear cataclysm, because there are very powerful folks, and as I mentioned before, the defense contractors know how bad it would be for business for there to be a cataclysmic World War III that could lead to nuclear exchange, and that would be very bad for their business, and they're very powerful influence on world affairs, whether even though, so that this sort of thing, these governors that are limiting hopefully are there limiting the escalation to the proxy country involved, Ukraine. Hopefully those governors do exist, even though they're not talked about on, they're not talked about much. It might be hinted at in the mainstream media or even in independent media, but it's not mentioned a lot. But I think there's some kind of agreement that's already in place. There's an understanding, at least, that they know about mutually assured destruction, and they're making great effort to make sure it stays contained within the proxy country of Ukraine. So I think that, so those are the reasons why I'm reasonably cautiously optimistic. We'll say that. I'm cautiously optimistic that this is not going to escalate into World War III, and that hopefully that can help. Given that it's so difficult there's such a lack of a anti-war movement around the world. Maybe hopefully it's getting stronger, but it's nothing like, say, during the Vietnam War. It's not as strong as then, so it seems like so even if you think, well, feels like we're tilting at windmills in trying to fight for peace. Well, I think there's reason to believe, well, maybe we'll still be able to avoid a cataclysmic scenario of a World War III. So hopefully I'll help calm the nerves of those that might be being alarmed by some of the headlines. So I think it's good to not to alarm people too much. I wish some of the influencers would tone it down a little bit, even though, yeah, I mean, at the same time, you can both tone down the alarmism and still encourage people to campaign for peace and still talk about still challenge their congressional representatives, for instance, about the danger, because this is increasing the danger of nuclear war. There's no doubt about it. And that's why this is so reckless to be pushing this so much. I have no doubt that is very reckless, and we should still campaign for peace. We should still be trying to hold our congressional representatives and other elected and unelected officials about how they're putting all of us in danger. And yes, we should still do that. And I should do it myself more. I need to write back a congressional representative, Craig, and challenge her on her points that she just basically, I think she's just reiterating some talking points she was given. That's what my impression was. Yeah, given probably by the deep state. But that would be my guess. Is that's what she just. But I don't know why. She would just parrot whatever, just read from a script basically. But yeah, but it's still should still challenge the powers that be. We need to achieve detente. This is reckless. I agree. At the same time, maybe we can still be reasonably hopeful, I think, that World War III can be avoided. So those are my basic points. So yeah, I guess I've hopefully made some good points. And if you're still watching, thanks for watching.